My motive for doing what I am going to do is simply personal revenge. I do not expect to accomplish anything by it. Lincoln, Montana, 1996. This cabin is the chosen home of Theodore J. Kaczynski, more commonly known as the Unabomber. He's long been feared as America's smartest criminal, a serial bomber who's killed and wounded targets across the country with no clear connection. For 17 years, he's eluded the FBI. It's the largest, most expensive manhunt in the Bureau's history. He's the evil genius they simply can't catch, likely history's most intellectual serial killer. He's terrorized the nation, instilling fear in Americans about opening their mail and getting on planes. And he did it all from his cabin. Here is where he built his bombs, where he wrote his manifesto, and where he evaded capture for nearly 2 decades. It's where he turned from off-the-grid recluse to world-famous murderer. This cabin contains all the evidence the FBI will need to convict him. It's located deep in the Montana wilderness. Back in 1969, Ted moved here from California, where he left behind a shining career as a math professor at UC Berkeley. He wanted to get closer to nature and far, far away from everyone who pisses him off, which is most people. He built this cabin with his brother, back when Ted still talked to him. It's got no electricity, no plumbing, just a wood stove, a bed, and a whole lot of books. Right now, Ted is building another bomb. They're meticulously crafted, and he's continuously improving his technique. Every year, they become more lethal. In fact, he's got another one under his bed, wrapped and ready to go. But he won't get a chance to send it, because despite his intellect, he made some pretty dumb mistakes. This video is largely based on these 2 books. Links are in the description. We attribute the social and psychological problems of modern society to the fact that society requires people to live under conditions radically different from those under which the human race evolved. Born in 1942, Ted grows up in a pretty average family in the suburbs of Chicago. They're working-class Polish Americans. His parents are politically progressive, bookish and intellectual, and really into the outdoors. They're strict but loving. At least, that's how they remember it. It becomes obvious at a young age, the bombings. So most of the cases are pretty straightforward in terms of understanding motive and perpetrator. But amidst all of this, the FBI's San Francisco bomb squad makes a shocking discovery. 12 mysterious, similarly built bombs can be linked to one elusive killer or group. They have next to nothing to go on. Just for whatever unknown reason, this string of explosives seems to target universities and airlines. Whoever is building these bombs is an expert crafter, and careful to not leave any DNA behind. Not a hair, not a fiber. They're encased in beautiful handmade wooden boxes. There are no eyewitnesses to the bombings, and no letters from organizations claiming credit. The victims appear to be scattershot of random people. The unknown perpetrator is referred to by the code Unabomb, for university and airline bomber. So far, his bombs have killed 1 person and injured 20 others across 5 different states. Unlucky recipients of the Unabomber's early packages include a campus security guard, a handful of graduate students and professors, a secretary, an airline executive, and passengers on a flight from Chicago to DC. Some are injured quite badly. The first death is in 1985, Hugh Scruton, a guy who owned a computer store in Sacramento and was about to get married. What does he have to do with any students? Students are prime subjects for these experiments because of their frequent contact with professors who play a big part in MKUltra. Some of the professors know the role they play. Many don't. During the post-war period, the CIA becomes the largest employer of college professors, and the military is by far the biggest source of funding for psychological research. Professors acted as consultants and researchers for military-backed projects. They used their status to encourage their students to participate in experiments, often involving drugs like LSD. Afterwards, they reported back to the government. Harvard becomes heavily involved in Army-sponsored studies. One of the CIA's main men on campus is the superstar psych professor, Henry Murray. Murray is well known for his studies of personality, and since the CIA's beginnings, his theories have influenced how they recruit new agents and how they interrogate suspects. When Murray and young Ted Kaczynski cross paths, Murray is at the end of his career, and he recruits Ted for his final, most elaborate experiments. They're meant to assess the effects of stress and harsh interrogation on gifted male students. Murray wants to know, what will it take to break an educated, intelligent man? The setup is simple. Ted and 21 other students are asked to write an essay about their most deep-seated beliefs. Then they're told they'll discuss their beliefs with a fellow undergrad. The experiment aims to compare the effects of stress on college men who seem psychologically healthy and well-adjusted, with students who seem alienated, pessimistic, and lacking in identity. Ted is most likely recruited for the second group because he's showing signs of depression. Ted's personal essay stands out as the most pessimistic of them all. It suggests that he was already vulnerable before the abusive test began. He is also the youngest and the poorest in the group. The students are told this exercise is just to study different personalities. In truth, now the real experiment begins. The essays are handed to lawyers trained in manipulation, who are instructed to attack the values expressed in them. The students endure harsh interrogations in brightly lit rooms. They face calculated personal critiques designed to humiliate and erode their sense of self. All the while, electrodes monitor their stress responses. Later, they have to watch these stressful and humiliating moments on video, over and over again, for 3 years. As Murray himself describes it, the tests were designed to be abusive. He's had a lifelong fascination with pain and stress and is known to have a sadistic streak. Plenty of participants will later report the experience to be deeply unpleasant, with lasting trauma. But Ted's responses are the most extreme in every category. Murray's team identifies him as the most traumatized of all. Yes, Ted Kaczynski got MKUltra'd. You can read all about it at CIA.gov. In consequence, many claim the CIA created the Unabomber, but that's an oversimplification. It's not so easy to prove how much effect the experiments had on Ted's turn to terrorism. None of the other students in the experiment are known to have become killers. Some psychologists believe the experiments were stressful enough to create anger problems in Ted, or even aggravate latent schizophrenia. But other psychologists evaluate him as undeniably sane. Ted himself dismissed the idea that the tests were anything resembling psychological torture. He was very invested in being seen as psychologically healthy until the bitter end. He's taking great pains to not be painted as damaged or crazy. He wanted his murders to be understood in the context of his beliefs, not his personal history. If people saw his actions as a result of trauma or madness, it would invalidate his ideas that formed his last year at Harvard. Ted becomes increasingly disillusioned with the industrial technological system. He comes to believe that technology is slowly destroying humanity and eroding our freedom. He's horrified by widespread psychological suffering and how industrial technology has severely damaged the planet. He's certain that it'll only get worse the more technology develops. So anyone who helps advance technology in any way is the enemy. Scientists, engineers, business people, what Ted calls the technician class. Ted starts having revenge fantasies and becomes obsessed with how society enforces obedience with psychological controls. He daydreams about breaking away from society and living off the grid. Ted graduates Harvard and goes on to get his PhD in math at the University of Michigan. He's quickly establishing himself as a brilliant mathematician and is offered a tenure-track position at UC Berkeley as their youngest professor ever. His students don't like him very much, but he's publishing groundbreaking papers on boundary functions. But Ted resigns one day without warning. He tells his family that he's done with teaching math to future engineers who will advance the industrial technological system and continue destroying the planet. Ted buys a bit of land near Lincoln, Montana, and builds a cabin with his brother. He's ready to escape the advanced technology that surrounded him at UC Berkeley. He wants to live a simpler life, far away from everyone he's ever known. And then, he starts to build his first bomb.
Through our bombing
times, we hope to promote social instability. In industrial society, propagate anti-industrial ideas, and give encouragement to those who hate the industrial system. In 1993, the Unabomber strikes twice after a 6-year hiatus. Two prominent researchers, a computer scientist and a geneticist, receive packages the size of a VHS tape. The bombs detonate upon opening, and both professors are badly injured. Shortly after, the New York Times receives a typewritten letter. It claims credit for the bombs and says the public should expect more to come. In 1994 and 1995, the Unabomber succeeds in killing 2 people with his mail bombs, an advertising executive and a forestry lobbyist. As feared, his explosives have become notably more sophisticated. Bombings are usually accompanied with demands for money or some kind of action. What made the Unabomber so difficult to understand and to find is that his bombs never came with any requests. They seem to be built only to cause fear, injury, and death. 17 years after starting his bombing spree, the Unabomber finally makes his demands known. He writes the New York Times again, announces that he will permanently desist from terrorist activities if they publish a 56-page manifesto. The request kicks off a fierce debate within the FBI and the newspaper, to publish or not to publish. The FBI has a clear policy to not negotiate with terrorists, but they also believe he'll honor his promise and stop killing people. After all, this is what the bombs were seemingly for, to force people to pay attention to his views. Plus, they still lack leads. If the public reads the manifesto, someone might be able to identify the Unabomber, so the manifesto is published. The FBI decides it should just be the Washington Post, though, because it has fewer readers and the newspaper's stands will be easier to surveil. So they think. Interest in the Unabomber is huge. Newspaper sales hit a record high that day, with lines snaking around the block. Across the country, Americans are eager to finally read what the Unabomber has to say. The manifesto opens with an iconic line. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. And though the manifesto is an argument that calls for dismantling industrial society, it's also, unwittingly, a self-portrait. Within its pages, the Unabomber has accidentally unmasked himself. David and Ted, though 7 years apart and very different, grew up close and loved each other very much. As adults, they had impassioned philosophical debates by mail and shared a lot of the same views. David also worried about technology's destructive effect on humanity. He'd also spent some time living off the grid in a self-made cabin. But David wasn't a killer. When the manifesto is published, he hasn't spoken to his brother in a long time. Ted cut him out when David got, "This is not to be a political revolution. Its object will be to overthrow not governments, but the economic and technological basis of the present society." In the decades since his arrest, Ted Kaczynski continues to fascinate and sometimes inspire. The manifesto's central argument is that technological advancements since the Industrial Revolution have robbed people of their freedom and well-being. These advancements are supposedly responsible for widespread psychological suffering and environmental devastation. It's a revolutionary call to dismantle industrial society altogether and warns that technology will inevitably overpower human autonomy. Many of Kaczynski's observations in the manifesto are true. Some of his predictions are prescient, and a lot of the grievances are understandable. It's not hard to find people who are also frustrated with surveillance or sad about environmental destruction. At the time of his capture, Time magazine wrote, "There's a little bit of the Unabomber in most of us." Nowadays, Ted Kaczynski continues to find admirers online, from teens on TikTok, depressed about climate change, half-ironically saluting Uncle Ted, to the extreme right mass murderer, Anders Breivik, who heavily quoted Kaczynski's industrial society in his own manifesto. But even if most people can find parts of the manifesto they agree with, most people are not willing to kill. Kaczynski knew that most people would be repelled by his crimes, but committed them anyway. Those who find the ideas compelling might want to check out Jacques Ellul, the thinker whose ideas most inspired the manifesto. The philosopher never advocated killing. They also should check out Ted Kaczynski's diaries. They lay bare the personal motivations that drove the Unabomber, beyond the manifesto that was polished for public consumption. Technological society really did seem to anger Ted, but Ted was also very, very angry, in general. In his diary, Ted Kaczynski writes that he was happy to kill innocent civilians. He took pleasure in causing people pain. He killed at least 9 dogs just because they barked too loud. He hated leftists. He hated doctors. He hated women. He fantasized about killing them just for rejecting him. He fantasized about killing his neighbors just because they annoyed him, including a toddler. He condemned technology as slavery and glorified simpler times that ran on. actual slavery. Kaczynski wasn't even much of an environmentalist. He made fun of them in his diaries. He littered proudly. He poached illegally. He logged on protected lands. You might get the sense that he only used environmentalism as a post hoc justification for his murders. A cynic who identified ecological concerns as the most acceptable excuse for killing.